This is a podcast from Duncan Cartlidge Online, the online resource for all construction professionals that's available 24/7. Please don't forget to subscribe at the place you usually get your podcasts so as not to miss a thing in this second series, as well as visiting our YouTube channel. Hello again and welcome to another podcast from Duncan Cartlidge Online. As usual, Barney, my red Labrador, is here to offer advice and to keep an eye on proceedings. And by the way, we would really appreciate it if you would like to write a review. If you're new to Duncan Cartlidge Online podcasts, welcome. Please don't forget to subscribe, as well as catching up with all the previous episodes. If you are already a subscriber, thank you for your support. In a minute, we'll have a look at the implications of the new Building Safety Act and its potential impact on procurement practice. But we'll start with a look at an old chestnut. This is such a fundamental issue, attracting talent to construction. And to finish, a reminder to look out your swimmers, as it's almost MIPIM time. Skills shortages. I'm unsure whether continually turning the spotlight on massive skills shortages in construction is just an excuse for government ministers to turn around in 4.5 years' time and say, when output targets haven't been met, we did our best, but we didn't have the labour force, and then blame it on Brexit. And as though new build is not a big enough problem, the National Audit Office announced this week that there were few contractors with the expertise to carry out maintenance on a £49 billion backlog for work on hospitals, schools, courts and museums. One common theme in the mini-calls to recruit more talent is get them young, go into schools or start a built environment GCSE. Now, why didn't anybody think of that one before? As someone who has been in and around education for many years, this approach doesn't seem to have worked. The difficulties are, first of all, getting into schools ahead of the armed forces, and then trying to convince 16-year-olds that working on a building site is preferable to working in a warm, cosy, digitally enabled office. Even a career in the army seems more attractive. I recall manning a desk at a recruitment fair some years ago and the problems in trying to get school leavers to engage. Worried parents hurried their offsprings past the construction careers desk with comments like, "Oh no, you don't want to do that. Remember what happened to your Uncle Bert." On the other hand, architecture seems to have no problem in recruitment. Take a look at some of the university's brochures, offering courses populated with young people sitting around in a nice warm studio, listening to music and making models. Unfortunately, the market for architects in the UK is rapidly becoming saturated as compared to the muddy boots professions, where it's another story. Building Magazine reported that, according to the RIBA, at the end of 2024, the number of architects in education has been rising steadily for the past 15 years, from around 15,600 in 2010 to 20,000 in 2022. There are currently approximately 41,000 RIBA chartered architects in the workforce, working for around 6,000 practices. This compares with around 30,000 registered architects in France, which has roughly the same population as the UK. Candidates in the UK appear to be drawn by the focus, during the early years of architectural training, on the relatively abstract and philosophical aspects of design, including how architecture can solve society's problems, and often neglects the less glamorous aspects of profession, like how to run a practice, maintain cash flow, designing buildings that work, and earning a living. Some years ago, I took a group of students to New York, and one of the places we visited was Pay Cobb Freed, an architectural practice responsible for some of the world's most iconic buildings, including the Louvre Pyramid in Paris. I always remember that we were introduced to the partner responsible for construction technology. How very refreshing, a person ensuring the technology works. And now turning to a very important piece of new legislation, the Building Safety Act of 2022, which, like the proverbial can, seems to have been kicked down the road by some. At present, many developers appear to assume that the Act doesn't apply to them, only to contractors and their professional advisors. What's very concerning is that an influential trade body last week reported in Building Magazine that after 12 months, construction clients haven't shown interest in engaging with the new legislation, and if anything, pressure to deliver projects faster and more cheaply is increasing, due in part to the lack of enforcement and contractors who apply more rigorous safety assessments being priced out of bids. The Building Safety Act was a direct result of the inquiry into the Grenfell Tower fire in 2017, in which 72 people died. The Grenfell inquiry laid bare a staggering chain of failures across government, private companies and regulatory bodies that contributed to the disaster. As a quantity surveyor, the Grenfell findings came as a great shock, as I've always assumed that the UK building regs were rigorously enforced. The Act came into force in October 2023 and is an attempt to make high-risk buildings, HRBs, safer. HRBs are defined by the Act as a building that has at least 7 stories or is at least 18 metres high with 2 or more residential units or is a hospital or a care home. Now, there is already a requirement under the Construction, Design and Management Building Regulations of 2015 for a health and safety file to be provided to the client, which should contain the information needed to ensure the health and safety of any person during any subsequent work, such as maintenance, cleaning, refurbishment or demolition. Much of the CDM information will be appropriate for inclusion in the so-called golden thread or digital golden thread required by the Building Safety Act, which will be explained later. The Building Safety Regulator has an important function in the new regime in England. The BSR is part of the Health and Safety Executive and will carry out its function as the Building Control Authority and assess a high-risk building control application using teams that include a registered building inspector and any other specialists required. Incidentally, building control professionals need to register with the new Building Safety Regulator after completing assessment of competence. One aspect of the new legislation to surface is that the Building Safety Regulator has made it clear that work will not be able to start on site until all key elements of the design have been completed and approved. Now, this could have major implications for so-called fast-track procurement, I always get told off for using that term, as well as single-stage design and construct. Until more projects have passed through the gateway process, it's too early to judge any potential impact. Now turning to the digital golden thread. The introduction of a golden thread of information for buildings was first introduced as a recommendation by Dame Judith Hackett in her report Building a Safer Future in 2018. It was to support duty holders in designing, constructing and managing their high-risk buildings in a holistic way, and is one of the most significant changes on how the construction industry approaches safety and compliance. In a nutshell, it's how the building evolved and how it will be kept safe and in good condition when occupied. The digital golden thread is all about accuracy and covers compliance with the building and safety regulations, transparency, who did what and when, including changes that were made after or during the design stage, accountability, did you build what you were supposed to build, and is what you build safe to occupy, including safety ratings, and capturing and sharing this information digitally. The golden thread involves keeping a digital record of crucial building information, starting from the design phase and continuing throughout the building's life cycle. The government has decided that the golden thread of a building's information must be stored digitally, although this can be on multiple systems. With Grenfell, the lack of a single entity overseeing the safety of the entire project created a gap in responsibility with devastating consequences. The key points for the golden thread information are: it should be kept digitally and securely and be capable of being transferred electronically, also be available as and when needed in a way that can be easily interpreted with consistent language, terminology and definitions. So, who's responsible for the golden thread? The Building Safety Act establishes a number of new roles. Each submission to the Health and Safety Executive must name an accountable person or persons and a principal accountable person. On large-scale schemes, there may be several accountable persons defined by the HSE as an organisation or individual who owns or has a legal obligation to repair any common parts of the building, for example, corridors, lobbies, staircases, etc. In addition, the person who has the responsibility to repair the structure and the exterior is known as the principal accountable person. For some schemes, the accountable and the principal accountable person could be one and the same person. Another significant step post-Grenfell has been the creation of a principal designer. The principal designer is intended to be the single point of accountability for building safety, ensuring that safety is embedded in every aspect of the design, from the initial conception through to completion. It's important that the principal designer is part of the design team and not a third party without influence over design decisions, and should be able to coordinate the design team. Should architects step into this role? Well, currently, there doesn't seem to be any great enthusiasm on their part. Indeed, in the recent past, architects have been shedding management responsibilities onto the shoulders of project managers. A principal designer is not expected to be an expert in every design specialism, but they are expected to know enough about the building regulations to assess whether a building design will comply with all the relevant regulations. Principal designers should support others, for example, in being able to pass on necessary information to contractors and explain to them how to demonstrate that elements are built properly. Is the principal designer role more suited to an independent, say, bureau control or compliance service, for example, that operates throughout Europe? The golden thread comprises two parts: design and construction and occupation. This ensures that any modifications or enhancements to the building are accurately documented and enables building owners to proactively identify potential risks or hazard and to take corrective action. During the design and construction phase, the duty to ensure arrangements are in place to keep and manage the information thread rests with the client or somebody on their behalf, and includes ensuring principal designers and principal contractors have access. When the building work is completed, the golden thread must be handed to the accountable person or principal accountable person responsible for the occupied building. The regulations do not prescribe any particular format for the golden thread, although pro formas are on offer from several commercial organisations. Crucially, relevant information must be easily identified and accessed by the principal accountable person. Sorry about that background noise, it was Barney having a scratch. Schedule 1 of the Higher Risk Buildings, England Regulations 2024, lists the information that must be included in a golden thread. During occupation, the accountable person is responsible for coordinating the golden thread, keeping it updated and ensuring it is accurate and accessible, and when they can't find this information, they need to justify why. If there are multiple accountable persons, then the principal accountable person will take lead responsibility for the golden thread. When a building is being refurbished, this may involve both duty holders, as defined by the Act, the principal accountable person, and the accountable persons, as many buildings will remain occupied during refurbishment. Reviewing and updating the golden thread where any maintenance, refurbishment or other construction work is undertaken. In the case of existing buildings, the accountable persons will need to make reasonable inquiries to find the information that allows them to assess and manage the safety risks of fire spread and structural stability. The important bit is that those who are responsible for the building know where the up-to-date information is and can give access to the people who need it. This includes anyone responsible for maintaining or working on the building and other relevant groups such as residents and emergency responders. At first sight, the Building Safety Act looks complex, but if it can stop another Grenfell, it will be worth it. And finally, on a lighter note, I recently had an email attachment asking me to join somebody or other at MIPIM. Incidentally, I have never been. For those who don't know, MIPIM is a 4-day real estate fair held every March in Cannes in the south of France. It's claimed over 20,000 visitors attend, which must do wonders for the local hospitality sector, not to mention the champagne producers. Then of course there's the €2,000 for a delicate pass and return business class air travel. Now, you can call me a cynic, but I wonder if MIPIM would have the same appeal if it was held in, say, Slough. Not that, unlike John Betjeman, I have anything against Slough. It's just a thought. Well, that's all for this episode. I hope that you found it interesting. Thank you for listening to the end. This has been a podcast from Duncan Cartlidge Online. Barney and I would really appreciate it if you were to spread the word, subscribe, and if you have time, write a review. Bye for now.